The brass bell above the door had already stopped ringing. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and browned butter, and the morning light came through the front window in a warm golden sheet that fell across the small table where Colton Ashford sat with a coffee he hadn't touched. He was 6'2", tailored coat, a watch on his wrist worth more than every building on this street combined. And he was sitting perfectly still, the way a man sits when he's trying to convince himself he's in control. Then the back door opened. A girl stepped through, 10 years old maybe. Auburn curls pulled into a loose ponytail, a sketchpad tucked under one arm and a worn paperback in the opposite hand. She walked the way kids walk when they know a place belongs to them. No hesitation, no shyness, just a confident stride across the flour-dusted floor toward the front counter. She didn't notice Colton at first. He noticed her immediately. She looked up, and the air left his lungs. Her eyes were steel blue, not close to his, not similar. His, the exact same shade, set in a face shaped like someone else's, a face he hadn't seen in over a decade, but had never once forgotten. The girl's jaw, her cheekbones, the way her mouth turned up slightly at the corners even when she wasn't smiling. All of that belonged to her mother. But those eyes belonged to him. His coffee cup trembled against the saucer. He didn't look away. He couldn't. The girl tilted her head and studied him the way children study things. Without apology, without pretense, without the polite filters adults learn to wear. She looked at him like he was a question she hadn't decided whether to ask. Then she turned toward the kitchen and called out, "Mom, who's that?" The sound of something being set down hard. A tray, maybe. A pan. Then footsteps. Quick, deliberate. And a woman came through the doorway. We're not going to name her yet. Not now. What matters is what she did. She moved fast, placed herself directly between the girl and the man at the table, and when she spoke, her voice was level, steady, practiced. "Go upstairs. Now." The girl frowned. "But I was just—" "Rosie upstairs." The girl, Rosie, looked once more at Colton. Then she turned, tucked her book tighter under her arm, and disappeared through the back door. Her footsteps faded up a staircase. The bakery went quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. Colton's hands were on the table. They were shaking. He looked at the woman standing 3 feet away from him, and when he spoke, his voice was low, rough, barely held together. "Who is she?" The woman didn't move. Her arms were crossed. Her chin was up, but her hands, pressed tight against her own ribs, were trembling just as badly as his. "She's mine," she said. "Not yours. Mine." And that was the moment everything fractured, because his hands were still shaking, and hers were too, and both of them knew that the word mine had never sounded so much like a lie and so much like a prayer at the same time. How did a billionaire end up sitting in a small-town bakery staring at a child with his own eyes? A child who'd been told her entire life that her father was dead. To understand that, we need to go back to the morning he left, and back to the lie that kept him away for 11 years. But first, welcome. If you're new here, I'm glad you found this one. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I love seeing how far this community reaches. Now, before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever gone back to a place you swore you'd left behind, only to find that the life you walked away from kept going without you? That it grew something you never knew existed? Something with your eyes, and another person's smile, and a whole history you were never part of? Because that's what this story is. This is the story of a man who left everything he loved to build everything he thought he wanted. And when he finally came back, richer, more powerful, more alone than he'd ever been, he found out the world had been keeping a secret from him, one that changed everything. But here's the part that will keep you up tonight. The woman he loved. She didn't keep the secret. Someone else did. And by the time you find out who and why, you won't be able to stop watching. So if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button now, because this story doesn't slow down from here. Let's go back to the beginning. 11 years earlier, on a Tuesday morning in late September, Colton Ashford had driven out of Milbrook with 2 duffel bags, a borrowed truck that coughed to life on the 3rd try. and the kind of ambition that convinces a man he can leave everything behind and still somehow keep it. Now he was driving back in a black Escalade with tinted windows, hand-stitched leather seats, and a woman beside him who had never heard the name of this town until 72 hours ago. Colton was 35 years old. His dark hair was still thick, though he wore it shorter now than he had in his 20s, and a construction scar ran across the back of his left hand, a pale, jagged line from the summer he'd poured his first foundation with a crew of 4, back when his company was just a name on a borrowed laptop and a business plan held together by coffee and stubbornness. That scar was older than his empire, older than his penthouse in the city, older than his name on the side of 30-story buildings, older than the Forbes profile and the investor dinners and the private flights. He'd kept the scar the way some men keep lucky coins, not because it was beautiful, but because it reminded him of who he'd been before money made it easy to forget. He was worth $2.3 billion, give or take the fluctuations of a Thursday afternoon. He owned commercial real estate in 6 states, had developed waterfront properties that reshaped city skylines, and had once turned down a cabinet appointment because he said, on live television, that he didn't have the patience for politics. The interviewer had laughed. Colton hadn't been joking. But right now, in this car, on this road, with the autumn trees pressing close on both sides and the asphalt cracked and patched in the same places it had been cracked and patched a decade ago, none of that mattered. The money, the buildings, the name, all of it felt like a suit he'd put on over a wound he'd never properly cleaned. Vivian Hale sat in the passenger seat with her legs crossed, her designer bag placed precisely on her lap, and her phone tilted at an angle that caught the most light. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a low twist that looked effortless and had probably taken 20 minutes. She was 33, sharp-featured, and moved through the world with the controlled efficiency of someone who treated time like a non-renewable resource. She was either his fiancée or his business partner, depending on which room they were standing in. The ring on her finger was a 3-carat emerald-cut diamond. She wore it the way she wore everything, like it had been placed there by a stylist, not a lover. Vivian didn't know about Milbrook, not really. Colton had mentioned it once, early on. Small town, middle of nowhere, nothing worth going back to, and she'd accepted the explanation without pressing because Vivian didn't look backward. Backward was inefficient. Backward didn't close deals, didn't grow portfolios, didn't get you a corner table at the places where corners mattered. She had built her life on forward motion, and she expected the same from everyone around her, especially from the man whose name was next to hers on a joint venture worth $400 million. She glanced up from her phone now and looked out the window. The trees were turning, orange, copper, deep red, and between them, the occasional farmhouse sat low against the land, looking like it had been there since before the road. Her lip twitched. Not quite a frown, not quite a smile. Something closer to the expression a person makes when they walk into a room and realize there's nowhere to sit. How much further? She asked. We're here. The sign appeared on the right. Welcome to Milbrook. Population 4,200. Same sign. Worse paint. Someone had stuck a reflective smiley face sticker in the lower corner, and the weather had peeled half of it away, leaving a crescent grin that looked more unsettling than welcoming. Colton stared at it as they passed. 4,200. When he'd left, it had been 4,400. Even the people were leaving. Something shifted in his chest as they turned onto Main Street. Not pain, not exactly nostalgia, something deeper, something harder to name. It lived in his ribcage the way an old injury lives in a joint, quiet until the weather changes. And the weather had just changed. Every street corner was a memory. The bench outside the pharmacy where he'd sat the night he decided to leave. The crosswalk near the library, where he'd kissed a woman for the first time under a sky so full of stars it had looked fake. The hardware store, Hadley's, with the same green awning, though it sagged more now, and the flag out front hung at a tired angle. The post office, with its crooked mailbox. The gazebo in the town square with peeling white paint, surrounded by oak trees that had grown taller in the years since he'd been gone, their roots buckling the sidewalk in slow, patient rebellion. And then, on the corner, warm brick against the grey October afternoon, Callaway's. The bakery sat where it had always sat, solid and modest and glowing from within. He could see the brass bell above the door from inside the car, the chalkboard sign on the sidewalk, the handwriting on it slightly different from what he remembered, a little more confident, a little less careful. He couldn't read the specials from this distance, but he knew one of them was cinnamon. She always led with cinnamon. It had been the first thing he'd ever tasted from her hands, a roll pulled straight from the oven, the sugar still glistening, and she'd watched his face while he ate it with an expression that was half pride and half something else, something that had made him want to stay in that kitchen forever. "Stop the car." His driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Vivian looked up from her phone. Colton didn't get out. He just sat there, staring through the tinted glass at the bakery like a man reading a letter he'd thought was lost. Warm light spilled from the front window. Inside, the shape of someone moved behind the counter, quick, purposeful, familiar in a way that made his throat tighten. He couldn't see her face. He didn't need to. His scarred hand pressed flat against his thigh. He could feel his pulse in his fingertips, heavy and steady and wrong. Too fast for a man sitting still in an air-conditioned car. Too slow for the way his mind was racing. "You're being strange," Vivian said. Her voice was neutral, the way it got when she was filing something away for later use. "I'm fine." He wasn't. Whoever was inside that bakery, moving behind the counter, pulling trays, wiping down surfaces with the easy rhythm of someone who had done this 10,000 times, that was the reason he'd come back. Not the development deal, not the commercial property his team had flagged on the east side of town, not the quarterly projections or the zoning meetings or the investor call he had scheduled for Friday. Her. And then the memory came, unbidden and sharp, the way a scent can drag you backward through years in less than a second. October cold, the porch of a rented cottage at the edge of town, 2 duffel bags at his feet, the borrowed truck idling in the driveway, engine rattling, exhaust curling white in the morning air. And Mae, standing on the top step in a green wool sweater with a frayed cuff, her arms at her sides, her chin lifted, watching him. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't ask him to stay. She just stood there with her hands loose and her eyes steady, and she watched him load his bags into the truck bed like she was memorizing the way a person leaves. He'd told her he'd come back. He'd said it with his hand on her face and his forehead pressed against hers, and he'd meant it. God, he had meant it. The way you mean something when you're 24 and still foolish enough to believe that intention is the same as action. He told himself he just needed a year, maybe 2. Enough time to get the first project off the ground, to prove that the idea in his head could become something real. Then he'd come home. Then he'd come back for her. He told himself a lot of things. The truck pulled away. Mae stayed on the porch. And in the rearview mirror, she got smaller and smaller until the road curved and the trees swallowed her whole, and that was the last time he saw her. Until today. Have you ever made a promise you truly meant to keep, but life got in the way, and the distance between what you said and what you did grew wider every year until it felt impossible to cross? If that hits close to home, drop a heart in the comments. And if you're new here, go ahead and tap that subscribe button, because this story is just getting started, and you do not want to miss what happens next. The Marigold Inn sat 3 blocks east of the town square, wedged between a dry cleaner that had closed sometime during the previous decade and a vacant lot where someone had optimistically planted wildflowers that had since gone to seed. The building itself was 2 stories of aging Victorian ambition, gingerbread trim that needed repainting, a wraparound porch with 1 suspicious board, and a wooden sign that swung gently in the October wind, the gold lettering on it worn down to a whisper. Inside, the wallpaper was floral, aggressively floral. Roses the size of fists climbed every wall in the lobby, faded to a pinkish brown that suggested they had once been red and had simply given up. The floors creaked with every step, and the air smelled like dried lavender and stale curtains, the kind of scent that tells you a place has been cleaned regularly but hasn't been truly aired out in years. Colton stood at the front desk with his hands in his coat pockets, waiting while a woman named Trudy pulled a leather-bound guest book from beneath the counter. Not a computer, not a tablet, a guest book, with a pen attached to it by a beaded chain. Trudy was somewhere in her 60s, with reading glasses on a rhinestone chain around her neck and a smile wide enough to fit the entire town inside it. She opened the book, smoothed the page with her palm, and looked up at Colton with the kind of warmth that felt less like hospitality and more like reconnaissance. Ashford, she read from the reservation printout his assistant had faxed 3 days earlier. She tilted her head. Any relation to the Ashfords on Pinecrest? There used to be an Ashford family over on the west side, must have been 15-20 years ago now. Had a boy about your age, actually. Tall, dark hair. She smiled wider. Quiet type. Colton's jaw tightened. No relation. He said it too fast. The kind of fast that answers a question and asks a different one at the same time. Trudy's smile didn't dim. If anything, it brightened, the way a lamp brightens when you turn the knob one more click. Well, she said, sliding a brass key across the counter, an actual brass key, not a card. Welcome back to Milbrook, Mr. Ashford. Room 7, top of the stairs, end of the hall, best view of the square. She'd said, back, not welcome to. Back, and she'd said it with the casual precision of a woman who had lived in one place long enough to know every face that had ever passed through it, including the ones that had tried to leave quietly. Small towns, remember, that was always the problem. You could change your net worth, your address, your entire life, but you couldn't change the fact that Trudy Holloway at the Marigold Inn remembered the quiet Ashford boy from Pinecrest, and she was going to let him know she remembered, and she was going to do it with a smile that left no room for argument. Colton took the key without looking at it and headed for the stairs. The room was exactly what he'd expected, and precisely what Vivian had feared. She stood in the center of it, turning slowly, her designer bag still hanging from the crook of her elbow, as if setting it down on any available surface would constitute a binding agreement with the decor. The bedspread was white quilted cotton, the kind that belongs in a grandmother's guest room. There was a stain near the pillow, small, ambiguous, historical. The curtains were a heavy floral print that matched the wallpaper downstairs in spirit if not in pattern, and they smelled faintly of dust and something that might once have been potpourri. The radiator under the window clicked and ticked like a restless clock. Vivian set her bag on the desk, the only surface she deemed acceptable, and turned to face Colton with the expression she reserved for situations that were beneath her competence but still required her attention. The town council meeting is tomorrow at 10, she said, pulling a leather portfolio from her bag and opening it on the desk. Inside were renderings, architectural drawings, site plans, projected timelines, all of them crisp, professional, and devastating in their implications. I'll need the final copies of the acquisition agreements by 8. The site plan covers the east block of the square, commercial mixed-use, 4 stories, ground floor retail with residential above, parking structure on the back lot, standard footprint for a town this size. She tapped the site plan with one manicured nail. The east block of the square, the same block Colton had just been staring at from the car. And the existing structures? She asked, not looking up. Colton loosened his tie. It was his tell, the thing he did when something was pressing against the inside of his chest and he needed to create the illusion of space. He'd done it in boardrooms, in depositions, in the back of town cars after phone calls he didn't want to take. Vivian had seen it 100 times. She always noticed. She didn't always mention it. The existing structures come down, he said. His voice was even, professional, rehearsed. Standard acquisition process. We've got preliminary agreements with most of the property owners. Fair market value plus 15%. Relocation assistance where applicable. Most? Vivian looked up now. Her eyes were cool, assessing. The way she looked at balance sheets, at opposing counsel, at anything that had the potential to become a problem. 2 holdouts. Colton walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside an inch. From here, he could see the square, the gazebo, the oak trees, and the corner where warm light still glowed from behind a chalkboard sign, a hardware store, and... He paused. His hand went to his tie again, found it already loosened, and dropped to his side. A bakery. The words sat in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Vivian studied him. The way a jeweler examines a stone, turning it, looking for the flaw, assessing whether it compromises the value or enhances it. You're tense, she said. I'm tired. You're lying. She closed the portfolio. But that's fine. We'll fix it in the morning. She picked up her toiletry bag and disappeared into the bathroom, and Colton listened to the precise sounds of her organizing, bottles arranged by height, makeup bag unzipped and re-zipped, the faucet running for exactly as long as it took to test the water pressure and find it wanting. Vivian brought order to every room she entered. It was one of the things he'd valued about her when they'd first started working together. Right now, it made the room feel smaller. He stayed at the window, staring at the bakery's roofline through the thin curtain. The warm brick, the chimney that leaned slightly to the left, it had always leaned. Mae used to joke that the whole building was trying to get a better look at the sunset. From here, in the fading afternoon light, with the glow from the front window casting a soft rectangle onto the sidewalk below, it looked exactly the way it had looked the day he'd left, as if time had simply decided to leave this one corner of the world alone. He reached into his wallet, past the platinum card, past the business cards, thick stock, embossed, Ashford Development Group in charcoal letters, past the receipt he'd kept from his first property closing, the paper so soft now it felt like cloth. And there, tucked behind everything, pressed flat by years of pressure, a photograph, small, creased down the middle where the wallet folded, the colors fading at the edges the way old photographs do, surrendering their sharpness to time. Mae, at 24, standing behind the counter at Callaway's, laughing, her head tilted back slightly, her mouth open, caught mid-word or mid-joke, her eyes nearly closed with the force of it. Flour dusted her left cheek. Her auburn hair was escaping its braid the way it always did by mid-afternoon, loose strands curling against her neck. Her hands were mid-gesture, fingers spread, palms up, talking with her whole body the way she always did when she was excited or arguing or telling a story she loved. He'd taken that photograph 2 months before he left. A Sunday morning. The bakery had been closed, and she'd been experimenting with a new recipe, something with cardamom and brown sugar, and she'd been explaining why the ratio mattered, why you couldn't just follow the measurements, why baking was about feel, about knowing when the dough was ready by the way it moved under your hands. He'd pulled out his phone and taken the picture without telling her, and she'd noticed the flash and thrown a towel at him, and they'd both laughed, and the kitchen had smelled like something warm and unfinished and full of promise. 11 years, $2.3 billion, 200 employees, one photograph. He looked at it for a long time. Then he slid it back behind the receipt, closed his wallet, and put it in his coat pocket, close to his chest. Now listen, if this story is already pulling at something inside you, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. It takes half a second, but it tells the algorithm to share this story with more people who need to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come on now. You're going to want to be here for what happens when Colton walks into that bakery tomorrow morning. Trust me. The next morning, Colton told himself he was going for coffee. Just coffee. The inn didn't have a proper machine. Trudy had offered him something from a drip pot that looked older than the building itself, dark liquid that smelled like it had been sitting since dawn and had made its peace with that. And he declined with a polite smile and said he'd find something in town. He was good at telling himself things. He'd been telling himself things for 11 years, that he'd left for the right reasons, that the distance was temporary, that the silence between him and the woman he'd loved was mutual, negotiated, understood. He told himself he was going for coffee the way he'd once told himself he was leaving for just a year, maybe 2, with conviction, with the smooth, practiced ease of a man who had built a career on making other people believe what he needed them to believe, and who had gotten so good at it that he'd started believing it himself. The walk from the Marigold Inn to the town square took 4 minutes. He counted, past the vacant lot with the dying wildflowers, past the dry cleaner with newspaper taped over its windows, past Hadley's Hardware where old Silas Hadley, still alive apparently, still wearing the same canvas vest, was sweeping the front steps and didn't look up. The October air was cold and clean, the kind of cold that lives in small towns surrounded by farmland where there's nothing between you and the sky to slow the wind down. He reached the corner, the warm brick, the chalkboard sign, today's specials written in handwriting he would have recognized in a crowd of 1,000, the brass bell above the door, small and tarnished and waiting. He pushed the door open. The bell rang. One clear, bright note, exactly the same pitch, exactly the same duration, exactly the same small metallic shiver it had made every morning for as long as he could remember. It hit him behind the sternum, not like a sound but like a touch, like a fingertip pressed against the exact spot where memory lives in the body. His feet crossed the threshold onto old pine floorboards that groaned under his leather shoes, and the smell found him immediately. Cinnamon, yeast, brown butter, real vanilla extract, not the synthetic kind, but the dark, complex warmth of beans split and scraped and steeped into everything. The air inside Callaway's was 10 degrees warmer than the street, and it carried a sweetness that wasn't just sugar. It was time. It was repetition. It was a woman who had stood in the same kitchen for over 2 decades, pouring the same care into the same recipes, and the walls had absorbed it the way old wood absorbs everything. Sound, heat, history. The chalkboard menu hung behind the counter, slightly crooked, written in neat block letters with the occasional flourish on a capital letter, a habit she'd had since her early 20s. When she'd taken a calligraphy class at the community center and only half committed to it. Cinnamon rolls, cardamom scones, sourdough loaves, 2 sizes, blackberry tart, seasonal, coffee, drip or pour over. The prices were modest, almost stubbornly so. The kind of prices that told you the person setting them cared more about feeding people than maximizing margins. And there she was, behind the counter, her back half turned, arranging croissants on a wooden display tray with the focused precision of someone who had done this so many times that her hands knew the spacing by feel. Mae Callaway at 35. Silver was just beginning to thread through auburn hair pulled into a loose braid that hung over one shoulder. A green canvas apron, flour-dusted, the left strap fraying where it met the buckle, over a dark, long-sleeved shirt with the cuffs pushed up to her elbows. The beginning of laugh lines at the corners of her eyes from years of smiling at customers and years of not sleeping enough. Her hands, still strong, the knuckles pronounced from working with dough, a faint scar on her right index finger from a bread knife that had slipped years ago, were arranging the pastries with a gentleness that made them look precious, like each one mattered. She looked up, and the world stopped being a place with sound. It lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3, but inside those seconds, 11 years collapsed and expanded at the same time, vanished like they'd never happened, and weighed 1,000 pounds simultaneously. Her eyes met his across the counter, and everything he'd built between then and now, the buildings, the company, the wealth, the distance, the careful architecture of forgetting, all of it became transparent, thin as glass. And behind it, unchanged, undimmed, completely intact, was the thing he'd spent over a decade pretending didn't still own him. Colton stood in the doorway. He hadn't stepped fully inside. His left foot was on the threshold, his right still on the welcome mat, and his hand was on the doorframe, holding it the way a man holds onto something when he isn't sure the floor will hold. He did this everywhere: doorways, conference rooms, elevators, the entrances to restaurants where people waited to shake his hand. He lingered on the boundary, never fully committed to entering. A therapist had pointed this out 3 years ago, a sharp woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a corner office in the city. "You don't believe you belong anywhere," she'd told him, not unkindly. "You stand on the edge of every room waiting for someone to invite you in, and when no one does, you tell yourself you chose not to enter." He'd fired her 2 weeks later, not because she was wrong. Mae's right hand rose to her chest, slowly, almost involuntarily, the way a person reaches for something when they need to confirm it's still there. Her fingers found the chain around her neck, thin, silver, nearly invisible against her collarbone, and followed it down to the small ring hanging from it. A silver band, plain, slightly dulled with age. He'd bought it with 3 weeks of construction pay when he was 23, and full of a love so enormous it had made a cheap ring feel like a cathedral. He'd slipped it onto her finger on a Tuesday evening in the kitchen of this very bakery, with flour on the counter and the oven still warm, and she'd looked at it and then looked at him and said, "It's perfect," and meant it in a way that had nothing to do with the ring. She was still wearing it. 11 years after he left. 11 years after the letters stopped. 11 years after the silence settled between them like snow. Quiet, total, covering everything. She'd moved it from her finger to a chain around her neck, but she hadn't taken it off. She hadn't let it go. And that single detail cracked something open in his chest that no amount of money or distance or time had been able to seal shut. Then Mae's hand dropped. Her fingers released the chain, and whatever had been in her face, surprise, pain, the barest edge of a door cracking open, closed. It closed the way a professional closes a negotiation she's already decided to walk away from, completely, without hesitation. She wiped her hands on her apron, a brisk, final motion, the kind of gesture that erases everything that came before it. And when she spoke, her voice was level, steady, and stripped of every emotion Colton had just seen flash across her features. "What can I get you?" 4 words. Professional, cold, a wall built in real time, constructed with the speed and skill of a woman who had clearly spent years learning how to protect herself from exactly this moment. Mae, she didn't flinch, didn't pause. She turned to the chalkboard behind her and recited, "We've got cinnamon rolls, cardamom scones, sourdough in 2 sizes, or blackberry tart. Coffee's drip or pour over. The pour over takes a few minutes." "Mae, Register takes cash or card." She turned back to him, and her eyes, green, steady, ancient with something she wasn't going to share, met his without wavering. "If you need a minute to decide, I can help the next customer." There was no next customer. The bakery was empty. It was 7:15 on a Wednesday morning, and the only 2 people in the room were a billionaire who couldn't cross a threshold and a baker who wouldn't let him through the wall she'd built to replace the door he'd walked out of 11 years ago. He ordered coffee, black. She poured it without looking at him, her movements automatic, practiced, deliberate in their refusal to acknowledge that this moment was anything other than ordinary. Her fingers left a faint dusting of flour on the ceramic handle as she set the cup on the counter. He noticed. She pretended not to. He put a $20 bill on the counter for a $3 coffee. Didn't wait for change. Didn't ask for it. The bill sat there between them like a sentence neither of them wanted to finish, and Mae looked at it for a half-second longer than necessary before pulling it toward the register. He took the coffee and sat down. The small table by the window. The same table. The one with the slightly uneven leg that rocked if you set your cup down too hard. Sunday mornings, that table had been theirs. The newspaper spread between them. Her reading the arts section while he read the business pages, their ankles touching underneath, a private, daily tenderness that nobody walking past the window could see. It had been the quietest, most constant intimacy of his life, and he hadn't known that until he'd lost it. He sat down now and wrapped both hands around the cup. The coffee was perfect. Strong without bitterness, smooth, the exact roast and temperature that told him she hadn't changed her supplier or her method. That some things in this bakery remained untouched by time, preserved not by effort but by devotion. Of course it was perfect. Everything Mae made with her hands had always been exactly right. He drank, she worked, neither of them spoke, and the silence between them filled the room like weather, heavy, shifting, full of something that hadn't broken yet, but was close. That ring around her neck. 11 years and she never took it off. What do you think that means? Tell me in the comments. But hold that thought, because what happens next in this bakery changed everything. And I mean everything. The back door opened. Colton heard it before he saw it. The soft creak of hinges that needed oiling, the whisper of weather stripping against wood, the particular sound of a door that had been opened and closed 10,000 times by the same hands. He looked up from his coffee, and everything he thought he knew about his life rearranged itself in the space between one heartbeat and the next. A girl walked through. She was 10 years old, maybe a few months past. That age where childhood still clings to the roundness of the cheeks, but something sharper is beginning to emerge in the jaw, the posture, the way the eyes take in a room. Auburn curls fell past her shoulders, wild and only partially tamed by what looked like a recent attempt at brushing. She had a sketch pad under one arm and held a worn paperback in her other hand, something with a cracked spine and what looked like a library sticker on the bottom edge. She moved with the easy confidence of a child who had grown up in this space, who knew which floorboards creaked and where the good light came in through the windows. There was no hesitation in her stride, no shyness. She belonged here in the way some people belong to places, not by ownership, but by something deeper, something that has to do with being known and loved in a specific location for your entire life. She crossed the floor, heading for the counter, and then she stopped. Her head turned, her eyes found the man sitting at the window table, and Colton stopped breathing. Her eyes were the exact shade of steel blue he saw in his own mirror every morning. Not brown like Mae's warm green hazel. Not any shade that could be explained away or attributed to a distant relative or a trick of the October light streaming through the window. These were the eyes that had looked back at him from family photographs going back 3 generations. The eyes his mother had called Ashford eyes, with a mix of pride and resignation, tracing the line back through his father, his grandfather, and beyond. His eyes, unmistakable, undeniable, set in a face that was otherwise entirely Mae's. The shape of the jaw, the way her mouth curved slightly upward at the corners even in repose, the scattering of freckles across her nose, the auburn hair that caught the light the same way her mother's did. She studied him with a direct, unguarded curiosity that belongs only to children who haven't yet learned that staring is impolite. She looked at his coat, expensive, clearly tailored, at his watch, the kind that catches light and holds it, at his shoes, Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine, at his hands wrapped around the ceramic cup, and finally, searchingly, at his face. Something flickered across her features. Not recognition, exactly. She couldn't recognize someone she'd never met, but something adjacent to it. The way you look at your own reflection in an unexpected mirror and take a moment to understand what you're seeing. "Mom," she said, still looking at Colton. "Who's that?" The words hung in the air like a held breath. Mae moved faster than Colton had ever seen her move. One moment she was behind the counter, her hands still pressed flat against the worn wood grain, and the next she was around it, positioning herself between the window table and the girl with the smooth, practiced precision of someone who had been protecting this child since before she could walk. There was nothing dramatic about the movement. No rushing, no visible panic. Just a calm, determined repositioning that spoke volumes about how many times Mae had imagined this exact scenario and how thoroughly she had prepared herself for it. "Rosie, go upstairs." Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that takes effort, that requires you to press down hard on everything you're actually feeling and speak from somewhere above it. "You've got reading to finish." The girl, Rosie, shifted the sketchpad under her arm and tilted her head. "I finished it." "Then start the next one." "But who is Rosie?" Mae's voice didn't rise, but something in it hardened. An edge appeared that hadn't been there before. The edge of a mother who was not asking, who had moved past the realm of negotiation into the territory of absolute requirement. "Upstairs, now." Rosie looked at Colton one more time. Those steel blue eyes, his steel blue eyes, held his gaze for a long moment, and something crossed her face that seemed too knowing for 10 years old, too aware. The expression of a child who had learned early that adults kept secrets, and that the secrets they guarded most carefully were always the ones that mattered most. She didn't argue again. She turned, tucked the sketchpad tighter against her ribs, and disappeared through the back door. Her footsteps faded up a staircase, quiet, measured, reluctant. The sound of a child obeying, but not surrendering. The door clicked shut behind her. The bakery went quiet, not silent. The espresso machine hummed on the counter. The refrigerated display case cycled on with a low mechanical sigh. A car passed on the street outside with the distant, ordinary sound of tires on asphalt. But the quiet that filled the space between Colton and Mae was different. It was the quiet of two people standing on opposite sides of something enormous, looking at each other across a distance that couldn't be measured in feet. Colton's hands were shaking. Not subtly, not the barely noticeable tremor that you might miss if you weren't looking closely. His hands were shaking the way they shake when you've just narrowly avoided a car accident, when adrenaline floods your system and your body tries to process what almost happened. The coffee cup rattled against the saucer, a small, sharp sound in the heavy quiet. "Who is she?" His voice was barely a voice, rough, cracked, held together by nothing more than the desperate need to know, like something breaking in real time. A crack in a dam that had been holding for 11 years, and now the pressure behind it was too great, and the structure was failing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Mae's jaw tightened. Both hands went back to the counter, not gripping it, just resting there, fingers spread, as if she needed something solid beneath her to keep her standing. She looked at him, and what he saw in her face wasn't anger. It wasn't sorrow. It was the terrible, exhausting combination of both that happens when someone has spent an entire life living inside a wound, building walls around it, learning to function around it, constructing an entire existence on the foundation of a pain they never fully let themselves feel, because feeling it completely would mean they couldn't get out of bed in the morning. She's mine. 2 words, spoken quietly, spoken with the finality of a door closing, a lock turning, a conversation ending before it could truly begin. Mae! She's mine, Colton. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The words carried the weight of 11 years. 11 years of raising a child alone. 11 years of 3 a.m. fevers and school plays where there was only one parent in the audience. 11 years of answering questions about fathers with carefully constructed half-truths, of watching those steel blue eyes look up at her every morning and seeing the ghost of a man who had promised to come back and never did. Not yours, mine. She turned away, picked up a rag from the counter, began wiping down the already clean surface with the brisk, mechanical movements of someone who needed her hands to be doing something so her voice could stay steady, so the tears pressing behind her eyes wouldn't fall, so she could maintain the wall she had just built between them. The conversation was over. The door was closed. The professional coldness from earlier, the menu recitation, the refusal to acknowledge that this was anything other than a transaction, had become a fortress. But his hands were shaking. The coffee cup trembled against the table, ceramic on wood, a tiny rhythmic sound that seemed enormous in the quiet. And hers were too. The rag moved across the counter in small, tight circles, but the fingers holding it were trembling, almost imperceptibly, in a way that only someone watching very closely would notice. Her knuckles were white, where she gripped the cloth. Her shoulders were rigid, held in a position that looked strong, but was actually just barely holding together. Colton was watching very closely. He stood up. The chair scraped against the old floorboards, a harsh sound that made Mae's shoulders tighten further. He took 2 steps toward the counter, then stopped, still keeping distance, still not fully committing, still standing on the boundary between where he was and where he wanted to be. How old is she? Mae's hand stopped moving. The rag pressed flat against the counter. She didn't turn around. 10. 1 word, but it was everything. Confirmation and condemnation all at once. 10 years old. Which meant she had been born approximately 10.5 years ago. Which meant Mae had been pregnant 9 months before that, 11.5 years ago. Which was exactly when he left. Exactly when he'd driven away in that borrowed truck with his duffel bags and his promises and his absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing. That building something first and coming back later was the responsible choice. That love could survive distance if it was real enough. The math was brutal in its simplicity. Mae, his voice broke on her name. Actually broke, the way a voice breaks when you're trying to hold too much inside and it's forcing its way out anyway. Mae, look at me, please. She didn't turn around, but her shoulders shifted. Something in her posture changed. Not softening exactly, but no longer quite so rigid, as if the sound of his voice breaking had created a small crack in the fortress she'd built. Did you know? He asked. When I left, did you know? The question sat between them, heavy and impossible. Mae turned around slowly. Her eyes were wet, though no tears had fallen. Her hands were still gripping the rag like a lifeline. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady, held together by years of practice at not falling apart. No. 1 word, clear and absolute. I didn't know until 6 weeks after you left, and by then, she stopped, swallowed hard, started again. By then, you'd already made it clear you weren't coming back. What? The word came out sharper than he'd intended. Confusion and anger mixing into something that sounded almost like accusation. What are you talking about? I wrote you. I wrote you every week for 2 years. You told me to stop. You told me you'd moved on, that there was someone else, that I never... Mae's voice rose, then stopped abruptly. Her face had gone pale. What? And there it was. The moment when two people who had spent 11 years living in completely different versions of the same story suddenly realized they hadn't been reading from the same book at all. The letters, Colton said. His heart was pounding now, hard enough that he could feel it in his throat. I wrote you 43 letters. You wrote back. You told me you'd moved on. You told me to stop writing. You said... He stopped because Mae was shaking her head. Not gently, not slowly. Hard, definitive movements that said no with her entire body. I never got any letters, she said. Her voice was thin now, stretched tight over something that was starting to crack. Not one. I waited. I checked the mail every single day for 6 months, nothing. And I wrote you. I wrote you at the address you gave me before you left. I sent 10 letters before I finally... Her voice broke. Before I finally understood that you weren't going to write back, that you decided it was easier to just disappear. The bakery went absolutely silent. Even the ambient sounds, the humming espresso machine, the cycling refrigerator case, seemed to fade into nothing. There was just the two of them, standing on opposite sides of the counter, staring at each other with the dawning, horrible realization that someone had lied, someone had intercepted, someone had stolen 11 years from them, and they were only just now discovering the shape of the theft. I wrote you, Colton said again. His voice sounded far away, even to himself. 43 letters, every week for 2 years. I told you about every contract I signed, every building I broke ground on. I told you I was doing it all for you, that I was coming back as soon as I had enough to give you the life you deserved. I begged you to wait. And you... He pulled his phone from his pocket with shaking hands. You wrote back. You told me to stop. Show me. What? Show me. Mae's voice was hard now, harder than he'd ever heard it. If I wrote you, show me the letters. I don't have them. He stopped, because of course he didn't have them. He'd read them once, each one a knife to the chest, and then he'd destroyed them because keeping them felt like keeping the wound open. I threw them away, but I remember. You said you'd moved OUN, said there was someone else. You said... I never said any of that. Mae's hands were shaking worse now, the rag forgotten on the counter. I never got your letters and I never sent you anything telling you to stop. Colton, I was pregnant and alone and I had no idea where you were or why you'd just... vanished. I thought... Her voice cracked completely. I thought you'd decided we weren't worth coming back for. The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually took a step backward, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the nearest table. Someone... He couldn't finish the sentence. His mind was racing, trying to reconstruct 11 years of history with this new information, trying to figure out who would have done this and why and how. Someone intercepted them. Someone pretended to be you. Someone... Who? Mae's voice was rising now, anger and grief mixing into something that sounded like the beginning of a storm. Who would do that? Who would... And then she stopped. Her face went absolutely white. Her hand rose to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God. What? Mae, what is it? But she was already moving, already heading for the back door with quick, determined steps that said this conversation was about to shift location, that she knew exactly who would do something like this, and that someone was about to have a very difficult morning. Stay here, she said, without looking back. Don't leave. I'll be back. We're not done. She disappeared through the back door. Her footsteps pounded up the stairs. Faster now. Urgent, purposeful. A door opened and closed overhead. The sound of muffled voices, Mae's and a younger one, Rosie's, filtered down through the ceiling, though the words were indistinct. Colton stood alone in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of cinnamon and the ruins of everything he thought he'd known about the last 11 years of his life. His hands were still shaking. His mind was reeling, and somewhere overhead, a 10-year-old girl with his eyes was asking her mother questions, and he knew, with the absolute certainty of someone who had just watched their entire past rearrange itself, that the answers were going to change everything. If your heart just dropped, I need you to hit that share button. Send this to someone who needs this story tonight. because we are nowhere near the bottom of this. There is a secret buried in this town that goes deeper than anything Colton or Mae know right now. And when it comes out, everything falls apart before it can come back together. Keep watching. 2 blocks from the bakery, on a street where the maples had grown tall enough to form a canopy that turned gold every October, a tidy Victorian cottage sat behind a white picket fence that had been repainted every spring for the past 37 years. Lace curtains hung in every window, not the machine-made kind you could buy at department stores, but hand-tatted lace inherited from a grandmother who had believed that a home without proper window treatments was a home without dignity. A grandfather clock stood in the front hallway, and it chimed every hour whether anyone wanted it to or not, marking time with the relentless precision of something that had no intention of stopping until its gears finally gave out. Doraththa Callaway sat at her kitchen table folding cloth napkins into perfect triangles. She had 12 of them, cream linen with a thin burgundy border, and she folded them the same way every time, creasing each edge with her thumbnail until the fabric held the shape without argument. She folded when she was anxious. She had been anxious for 11 years. The phone call from Trudy at the Marigold Inn had come yesterday afternoon, because Trudy told everyone everything, always, without hesitation. It was her particular gift. The ability to share information with the cheerful efficiency of a newspaper delivered to every doorstep in town. A man named Ashford had checked in, tall, dark hair, expensive suit, the kind of watch that cost more than Trudy's annual salary, she'd said, though how she'd gotten close enough to see the watch was a question Doraththa hadn't asked. Dorothea's hands paused mid-fold, her thin lips pressed together until they nearly disappeared. The cameo brooch at her collar, her mother's ivory on pale blue, the profile of a woman looking perpetually to the left as if watching for something that would never arrive, seemed to tighten against her throat. She was 74 years old, and she had spent over a decade telling herself that this day would never come, that he had moved on, that he had built his life somewhere far away and had no reason to return to a town that had given him nothing but heartache and a girl who wouldn't wait for him. But he was here, and everything she had built, every careful lie, every forged sentence, every intercepted envelope, was suddenly standing on ground that felt less solid than it had an hour ago. She set down the napkin, stood, walked to the hallway with the measured steps of a woman who had learned long ago that rushing made people suspicious, that calm was its own kind of camouflage. She stopped beneath the ceiling hatch that led to the attic and looked up at it, the way you look at a door you've been trying not to open for years. Up there, behind boxes of holiday decorations and her late husband's fishing gear, rods he'd never catch another fish with, tackle boxes still organized the way he'd left them the summer before his heart gave out, sat a trunk, cedar, brass-cornered, heavy, the kind of trunk people used to bring on ships, built to survive crossings and keep its contents safe from salt and water and time. The key hung on a thin chain around her wrist, disguised as a bracelet, the metal worn smooth from years of her fingers touching it without meaning to, checking to make sure it was still there. Keeping it close was the only way to ensure nobody found what was inside. She knew what was in that trunk, the way she knew her own name. She could see it when she closed her eyes. The stacks of envelopes, bound with kitchen twine, organized by date. The handwriting that pressed so hard into the paper, it left impressions on the pages beneath. The stamps from different cities as he moved and built and became whatever he had become. Dozens of letters, handwritten, addressed to Mae Callaway at the bakery address, sent by a man who had promised to come back and had spent 2 years trying to keep that promise from a distance. And underneath those letters, the other ones, the replies, written in handwriting that mimicked Mae's but wasn't quite right if you looked closely enough. If you knew what to look for. Drafts crumpled and smoothed out again, practice runs where the loops of the letters weren't quite perfect, where the spacing was too careful, the punctuation too deliberate, the careful, meticulous forgery of a mother who had decided, with absolute certainty and the kind of love that becomes its own form of cruelty, that a broke young man with big dreams and empty pockets would ruin her daughter's life. She had written them herself, every single one. Dear Colton, I've moved on. I think it's best if you do the same. Please don't write again. Dear Colton, I'm seeing someone now. It happened faster than I expected. I hope you understand. It's better this way. Dear Colton, please stop sending letters. There's nothing here for you. I've made my choice, and I need you to respect it. She had sat at this same kitchen table, practicing Mae's handwriting until her wrist ached, copying the way her daughter curved her capital M and dotted her lowercase i's slightly to the right of center. She had bought the same stationery Mae used, cream paper with a faint floral border, and she had sealed each letter with the same brand of envelope, glue, pressing the flap down with the heel of her hand the way Mae always did, careful not to leave her own fingerprints in any way that might give her away. And then she had mailed them, one by one, from the post office on the town square, where old Herb Delaney took the envelopes without looking at the return address. Because why would he? It was just Mae sending letters. Nothing unusual about that. And Doraththa was her mother, so of course she might be mailing something on her daughter's behalf. Colton had read them. He had believed them. Because they came from Mae's address, in what looked like Mae's handwriting. And they said exactly what a man afraid of rejection expects to hear. They confirmed his worst fears, that he had left, and she had let him go, and the love he thought they shared had been more fragile than he'd believed. He never knew that Mae spent those same months checking the mailbox every day, waiting for letters that never came. He never knew that she cried in the back room of the bakery, flour on her apron and tears on her cheeks, wondering why the man who had promised to write had simply stopped. He never knew that she had written him too. Letters Doraththa intercepted from the outgoing mail that Mae left on the counter by the register. Letters that said, "I miss you, and I understand why you had to go, and please come back when you're ready, I'll be here." Those letters were in the trunk, too, unopened, unread, buried beneath the forgeries, like bodies beneath a foundation. Colton stopped writing 2 years after he left. Doraththa remembered the day the last letter arrived. The envelope was thick, wrinkled as if he'd carried it in his pocket for days before mailing it, the handwriting on the front shakier than usual. She had opened it at this table, the way she opened all of them, sitting in the afternoon light with a cup of tea gone cold, and she had read his final words with the cold efficiency of a surgeon examining tissue samples, looking for disease, excising what she found. "Mae, if this is really what you want, I'll respect it. I've written you 43 letters. I've told you everything I don't know how to say out loud, that I think about you every morning, that I'm building all of this for you, that I haven't touched another woman because it would feel like betrayal. I've begged, I've bargained, I've tried to give you space, and I've tried to close the distance, and nothing has worked. But I need you to know that I never stopped. I will never stop. You are the only thing I built any of this for. Every contract I sign, every building I break ground on, every time I check my bank account and see a number that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. It's all for you, because I promised I'd come back successful enough to give you the life you deserved. If you tell me one more time to go. I'll stop writing. I'll leave you alone. But I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I shouldn't have, knowing that the only thing I ever wanted was to be enough for you. Please, tell me there's still a chance. Yours, Colton." She had sat at this table for a long time after reading that letter. The grandfather clock had chimed twice. The afternoon light had shifted across the kitchen floor, climbing the wall in the slow progression that marked the passage of hours. And then she had picked up her pen, pulled out a sheet of Mae's stationery from the stack she'd been carefully depleting over the past 2 years, and written one word: "Go." She had mailed it that same afternoon. And he went. Doraththa touched the cameo at her throat now, a gesture that had become automatic over the years, a way of steadying herself when the weight of what she'd done pressed too hard against her chest. She returned to the kitchen, picked up the napkin, folded, perfect triangle, set it aside, picked up another. "I did what I had to do." She said it the way she always did, firm, practiced, the rhythm of a prayer she'd recited so many times it had worn grooves into her mind. But prayers were supposed to bring peace, and this one never had. This one sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and cold, refusing to dissolve no matter how many times she repeated it. Because here's the thing about a lie that works. It punishes everyone. The person you lied to, the person you lied for, and eventually, inevitably, the person who told it. Doraththa had watched Mae raise Rosie alone. She had stood at the edge of it, offering help that was always politely declined, watching her daughter work 18-hour days with hands cracked from flour and cold water. The bakery lights burning at 3 in the morning because Mae couldn't sleep, and kneading dough was better than lying in bed thinking about all the things she couldn't change. She had watched Mae tell Rosie that her father had died before she was born, a lie Mae had constructed to protect her daughter from the pain of abandonment, not knowing that the abandonment itself had been constructed by someone else, not knowing that the man she'd loved had tried desperately to stay in contact, and that every letter had been stolen, every attempt at connection severed by the same hands that now folded napkins into perfect triangles. And Doraththa had said nothing. Sundays at church, back pew, alone, because Mae stopped attending years ago and Rosie had never been baptized. Sermons about truth and grace and the liberating power of confession. Doraththa folded the bulletin into a perfect triangle and went home, and the trunk stayed in the attic, and the years kept passing, and the lie became so much a part of her life that she sometimes forgot it was a lie at all. Sometimes, late at night, she almost believed her own story, that she'd done the right thing, that Colton Ashford had been a dreamer with no prospects, that Mae was better off building a life here in Milbrook than following some boy to a city where she'd have no support and no safety net. But the grandfather clock was chiming now. The trunk was still up there, and Colton Ashford was back. Her hands, folding the last napkin, were trembling. Now, I want to ask you something real. Do you think Doraththa did the right thing? Was she protecting her daughter? Or did she steal something that wasn't hers to take? Drop your answer in the comments. I've read stories like this before, and this debate always splits the audience right down the middle. I'll see you in the next one. Remember to always stay golden.